Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now the Friday Crime Report. Belle Plaine, Minnesota, Saturday, February 3rd, 2024, 2:12 a.m. Justin Kudla had been a mindless thug for many years, and of course nothing was done about him because nothing ever is. Around 1:30 a.m. on February 3rd, he was at a local bar called the Red Door Bar. He was escorted out for being drunk and obnoxious, but his little reign of terror was only just beginning. As you probably noticed in a number of my recent crime reports, a lot of these hate crimes have been taking place at these bars, be it the local VFW or the local watering hole. These white supremacists aren't looking for a drink or a date or to unwind. What they're looking for is an unsuspecting black person to ambush, or, as we see in this case, a suspecting one. On the night in question, this Kudla character, having been already kicked out of one bar, went to another one, and this time he decided to start calling one of the black patrons the N-word. The victim finally confronted him about this, and that was when the racist attacked, striking the victim in the face, knocking him to the ground where he hit his head. Another patron of the bar helped the victim get to his house, which apparently wasn't far. An employee at the bar, who's also a friend of the victim, went to check on him the following day, and according to her, the victim had been going in and out of consciousness. She had the victim taken to the Mayo Clinic Hospital in New Prague, where he was diagnosed with a brain bleed and a skull fracture. According to a witness, this wasn't the first time that this Justin Kudla character had been menacing this man in particular that he had attacked. 3.5 weeks earlier, he had been verbally harassing this same person, so this was someone that he had been stalking. In this earlier incident, Kudla had been hurling racial slurs at his victim, but the victim decided to walk away that time. The slant that's been put on this hate crime attack is that this assailant had been calling his victim gay slurs as well. Apparently some of these white media reports, for the few who decided to report on it, wanted to make a deal out of that. So the victim may well be homosexual, but I'll explain why that's not very important in a moment. After the assault, police went to the attacker's home to speak with him about the violent beating that he had carried out. He claimed that it wasn't because he didn't like his victim, it was that the victim had been spreading rumors that he was using racial slurs. Nothing about any gay slurs, mind you. I guess he also didn't know that there were witnesses to his prior anti-black outburst either. These white supremacists are not known for their intelligence. Now, Kudla was arrested a couple of days after that violent attack last year, and he was charged with first-degree assault, and then, nothing. For the last year, there's been no movement on a criminal trial for this creep. Apparently nothing at all was done as far as the state prosecution for this thug was concerned. And you won't be surprised to learn that this isn't this racist punk's first brush with the law, because it never is. Reports are that he's had multiple prior convictions in Minnesota for domestic abuse, no-contact order violations, stalking, and domestic threats. This creep should have been under the jail. But he has racial immunity from the law, so he was allowed to remain on the loose. And this happened in Minnesota, where former Congressional Black Caucus member Keith Ellison is supposed to be the state attorney general. This animal has been allowed to remain on the loose for a year, and in all that time, Attorney General Ellison hasn't done a thing about it. Kind of like the same way that he dragged his feet on prosecuting the murder of George Floyd. He didn't want to move on that one, didn't want to lift a finger until there was a national outcry about it, and even then, he never charged the murderer with a hate crime. Gee, seems to be something of a pattern now, doesn't it? Okay, so why is this guy the subject of today's crime report? Because earlier this month, a couple of weeks ago, in the dying days of the Biden administration, our old immigrant friend Kristen Clark in Merrick Garland's worthless Civil Rights Division of the DOJ announced that they were going to bring a federal case against Kudla on the grounds that he committed his crime because of victim's race, color, religion, and/or national origin, and because victim was enjoying the goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, and accommodations of a local bar. The indictment also charges Kudla with willfully causing bodily injury to the victim because of the victim's actual and perceived race. That's what the DOJ's criminal complaint said. Now, the reason I felt this was important was because, as these white media reports mentioned, in addition to the racial slurs, Kudla had allegedly also made some gay slurs against his victim as well. For the last year, nothing was done about this at the state level, and it was only a couple of weeks ago that the feds bothered to do anything, and they said they're prosecuting him because of his hate crime being based on race. No mention of the victim's sexual orientation at all. The DOJ's press release said that the FBI Minneapolis field office is investigating the case with assistance from the Belle Plaine Police Department. Well, given what a diligent job that pigsty did with this case last year, I bet that this conviction's already in the bag, huh? I'm sure they gave this one the old college try. We'll continue with the moment of truth in just a moment, but first, a word from the official sponsor of Black Empowerment, Power Tools. There's no telling when something's going to come up, so make sure you carry your power tools at all times. You never know when you're going to need to bring the hammer down, or when you'll have some trash that needs to be blown away, or some obstacle that requires cutting down. Don't get caught empty-handed. Keep your hammer close by. Keep that leaf blower at the ready, and always carry your steel. Power Tools. Because no matter what your day job or side hustle may be, there's no excuse for not being ready to put in some work. This is the reason that it took a year to bring any actual charges against this criminal. Had this merely been a case of an attack against someone because they were gay, then there would have been charges filed immediately, and he would have been held without bond. But the gay slurs part was meaningless, and we can tell it was meaningless because the state authorities and the feds didn't even bother to mention it. To them, that was a non-factor. The white media felt like they should mention it, but obviously the authorities felt it didn't matter at all, and you better believe that they tried to find every way that they could to make this into some sort of anti-gay thing. It's kind of like whenever some trans person is attacked, if they're black, the first thing they point out is they're trans. They make sure to say that. So what this means is they tried to make a gay case out of it, an LGBT thing out of it, and they couldn't. So like, okay, well, we may have to go with what it actually was. And they took their sweet time bringing the few charges that they brought. Because this is about maintaining a certain status quo. We've seen this from Kristen Clark time and again. Like with the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery and others, they always drag their feet. And we saw this with Keith Ellison as well. This is what they do nationwide. This is how you know that there is this unspoken but still fiercely enforced policy that when it comes to black people, you better not bring any hate crimes charges on black people's behalf. See, whenever you have the ridiculous spectacle of some corrupt prosecutor charging a black person with an alleged so-called hate crime, you never see the case mysteriously disappearing over the course of a year. They drag those folks into court, evidence be damned. But when a black person is a victim, we routinely see all of this foot dragging and stalling and other delaying tactics until the charges eventually disappear. Had Kudla's victim been anything other than black, there would have already been a prosecution, and it would have been on all the grounds, even at the state level. In fact, practically all of these asinine prosecutorial stunts that we've seen where they try to bring hate crimes charges against a black person, they do that at the state level. It almost never happens at the federal level. So what does that tell you? Any prosecutor who calls themselves thumbing their nose at the public by giving these asinine hate crimes charges against a black defendant, that is somebody who not only needs to be thrown out of the DA's office, they also need to have their law license stripped. These are not individuals who should be anywhere near a courtroom, but they are precisely the kind of individuals the white supremacy prefers. And many of these individuals find their way even into the Department of Injustice. That's what they're there for. Not to enforce the law, but to make sure that the law is never allowed to touch certain individuals. And of course, there's also the other aspect to all this, which is that as black people, it's very silly to call themselves going into bars, places where they know that there's going to be a whole bunch of white supremacists or people from the dominant society getting drunk. You're going into their turf, and here you are thinking that nothing's going to happen. Black people, too many of us, keep going into these situations being casual and wind up becoming casualties. A lot of black folks do not like the idea that they should have or be prepared to exercise some form of personal protection. But the reality happens to be these white supremacists are always out here doing this mess. And if you got somebody who you know has been giving you trouble time and again, you better be prepared to defend yourself. Because when it comes to confrontations, there's only two types of white supremacists. Those who have already carried out some sort of violent and even lethal attack, and those who are planning to do so. As black people, we need to make it clear that not only are we hard targets, but these are people that it's in your best interest not to target at all. This victim was fortunate, at least he didn't die, but as I've chronicled for you just in the last few weeks, this is a scenario that plays itself out far too many times. Too many black people simply refuse to accept the harsh reality of the world that they live in. And in this day and age, not only will that cost you your safety, but it could wind up costing you your life. And that's also part of what helps to embolden these white supremacists. We don't need to be sitting here hoping that these corrupt, racist, anti-black DAs are going to actually prosecute these white supremacists after the fact. They've already shown that as far as they're concerned, attacking black people is not a crime at all. That is meant to encourage these anti-black violent attacks. It is up to black people to be ready, willing, and able to ensure their safety no matter who tries to endanger us. And shame on any black person who decides if they're going to call themselves criticizing black people for protecting themselves or otherwise tisk-tisking or saying, well, did they have to do that? No, the only people who we need to be asking that question of are the white supremacists. And if you're not willing to do that, then you don't need to be speaking on hate crimes at all. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones the white corporate media chooses to show you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. BC, Yasharon Heron, Starlet Thompson, Mark Stroud, and Jesse Good. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.